just a quick note for some healing that I'm doing right now that may or may not encourage you for the same thing. I am working on self-concept and inverting all of the negative thoughts that we are programmed with. So I have this exercise that is an amalgam of some techniques that I have learned from other YouTube manifestors, from articles, from studying equal and opposite forces, all of that sort of thing, and then something that I came up with myself. So it's kind of an amalgam of all those things. And it is the I am greater than I was, and I got that sentence from the album by 21 Savage. So with this technique for self-concept, you basically invert the equal and opposite, kind of like I tell you guys in other videos. You invert the equal opposite force for everything that you think about yourself and reconceptualize it as the mirrored opposite. And for this one, I spoke in another video, but I'm going to break it down a little bit more, about how I had this concept when I was younger from religious trauma and then just being an intellectual child and thinking philosophically from a very young age. I used to, because of the trauma in my household and the abuse that I suffered in my household, and the type of unhealed people that I was around for such a long period of time, I used to tell myself a sentence that I wrote down in this exercise, that I must be one of the bad ones, otherwise God would not have put me here with this family. I used to think things like, our family must be some of the bad ones or the unlucky ones. That's why we have to deal with the things that we do. This is why I'm stuck with them. I must be a bad seed, which is why God put me with such a terrible family. I used to tell myself things like that. And when I inverted that, when I'm doing this exercise, I wrote, I must be one of the good ones, one of the powerful ones, for God to put me in such a dark place to serve out karmic justice and this sentence to the system. And I wrote that, and something hit my spirit when I wrote that, and many times it will when you guys are doing this equal and opposite, because the opposite feels so much more truthful and resonates with your spirit so much more. And I thought about this also with Tim Ballard and the types of things that he is battling with human trafficking, because I relate heavily to that story because of the sexual abuse that I have suffered as a child and the forced incident that I dealt with after leaving an abusive partner, which you guys have also heard me talk about in other videos. So, one of the things that they touch on in that video that I was reminded of when I wrote this sentence was, usually the most powerful people are going to be put in arenas where they're going to battle the bigger monsters. And this epiphany really hit me as truth. And I've talked about this a little bit in different words in the video that I put up about trauma survivors being warrior god seeds. I believe that's the title of it. I'll put it in the caption for you guys. But if you think about every superhero movie that you've ever watched, or you guys think about the hero's journey, or you guys think about really any story or even any video game where you have to fight the big boss, usually when you face that big boss, like the most terrifying creature that you have to fight, right, you're usually in your most empowered state. And before that battle, if it's somebody who was considered a weaker vessel throughout the story, there's usually this revelation period where something occurs to their consciousness to shift who they are before this battle. You guys, a recent example of things that I've watched or played, is the new Super Mario movie, Lord of the Rings. This story rings true in almost every cinematic universe, but for me recently, Prince of Egypt too, before, even in the biblical story as well, but in the DreamWorks film that I watched again recently, the burning bush moment where Moses is empowered and fed life through his consciousness before he goes and faces Ramsey to ask that Ramsey let God's people go, right? And then you see this moment of almost a defeat before the moment of revelation, and they become their most empowered self before they face this big boss. Well, why does that happen, right? So when I wrote this sentence that I must be one of the good ones and one of the powerful ones for God to put me in such a dark place, well, this rings true of everybody who is the cycle breaker in their lineage and the people who are going to bring the most karmic justice to their line and restore the karmic scales and restore homeostasis in the universe. Because you cannot, the darker situation you started out in, it only makes sense that the mirrored opposite is that you have to be a more powerful seed, because it is, again, an equal and opposite energy. And God is not going to put the weaker or underdeveloped vessels into a place where they cannot battle that thing. So a lot of the time you are very strategically placed where you are. And when you are in the paradigm of the confused child, or you're in the paradigm of being unawakened, of course you don't know that. But in your awakened state, you will come to realize that as the cycle breaker, it is intended for you to be put in the darkest places. You know, because we can serve karmic justice and we can do very positive works in the world. But as we know from the spiritual journey, on an individual level, unless you're getting to the root of the issue, you're not really solving the issue. So now when you look at this on a collective level, the collective root is going to be the darkest, most difficult place to penetrate in society. And a lot of the time that is stuff like violence and dark crimes and sexual crimes, things like that. Very, very dark things. And somebody somewhere in the lineage, some starseed somewhere in the lineage is going to come here and face those things. And if you realize you're one of those people, it's because you're one of the most empowered people that are here. So when you come into agreement with that mentality and that self-concept, I think it completely shifts a lot of the things that you may hold resentment and bitterness towards, but it also really lets you know strategically where you're at and how much esteem you should have in the fact that you were able to stand up and battle and live through certain things like that. There is a lot of esteem and a lot of power when you realize that. And I just wanted to touch on that because it's something that I consistently come to epiphanies about and am constantly reminded about. And I was doing that now, and it's such a beautiful moment every time I think about it. So I wanted to share that with you guys in case that word of knowledge can help you out as well.